The Tucson single-family rental market, May 2026. So in this video, what I like to do is give you a look at the rental market and then take a look at the employment market to put that into context and what that looks like kind of in the bigger picture as it relates to Tucson as a whole. Hi, Steve Schultz here from Blue Fox Properties. The information I'm going to share with you is based on various sources and the most recent information I could find for each topic. So not all the information is from the same time period. So let's take a look. So first of all, the rental market. So Tucson single family rents have been essentially flat for the past 5 years. And this is based on MLS Southern Arizona data from May 2026. Now the MLS Southern Arizona data includes Tucson and the surrounding cities. So this is including like Oro Valley, Marana. It even goes down into Nogales and some of that. But Tucson is certainly the biggest numbers wise. So that is greatly impacting the overall data. All right. So the current median rental rate is actually in May of 2026 is $17.95 per month. And that's completely flat year over year. And I'm going to share a little bit more information with you in just a moment to describe to you how that looks historically. Now, if we take a look at the data just based on bedroom, the 3-bedroom median rental rate is $1,800 per month and the 4-bedroom is $2,100 per month. I focus on just the 3 and 4 bedroom because that's what most of the rentals are that we deal with. And so that's where we focus there. A lot more 3 bedrooms and 4 bedrooms. But if you take those numbers, roughly combining the two is just under 2,000 bucks as a round number, but just to give you a feel for what that looks like overall. All right. So if we look at the long-term context from a yearly perspective, and again, this is based on MLS Southern Arizona data, the 3 bedrooms in particular, the 3-bedroom median lease prices year by year. So if we look at 2011, that's $1,035. If we then track that up to 2019, it was $1,300. If we do the math on that, that's almost exactly a 3% increase per year since 2011. And that's what you'd kind of expect, you know, kind of inflation is usually around that 3% range, plus or minus. So that's about on par with where you would expect. Now in 2020, that went up to $1,425. And then in 2022, it actually went up to $1,795, which is where we're at currently. So you can see there was a big run up there for a couple of years. That was during the COVID timeframe. But then since 2022, that has remained flat. And so far this year in 2026, it's also that median rental rate is at $1,795. So again, very, very flat. So that's both good news and bad news, right? The good news is it's very stable. The bad news is it's very stable, right? If you're a landlord looking for rental increases, that's not a good thing, right? If you're a tenant that doesn't want rental increases, that's a great thing, right? It's staying flat. So that's what our market looks like. And historically, if we go back beyond 2011, that is typically what it looks like too. Very, very flat market. If you do the math on that, the price per square foot is $1.29 per square foot currently. The days on market, the median is currently at 33 days as of May of this year. And that's actually up 4 days from last year. So if we compare year over year, and over the past 2 years, it's a lot longer than the 2021 and 2022 frenzy, where it was as low as 14 to 17 days. So very, very different, right? And so it looks like we're coming into a more balanced market and in fact, very stable. Now, as far as renter demand goes, kind of the sweet spot for that is between the $1,500 and $2,000 range is where we're seeing a lot of activity. And basically what happens if the rental rate gets a lot above that $2,000, there just are less people that can afford that. So what we're finding is the properties are sitting on the market longer at those higher price points. All right. So the next thing I want to take a look at is how do Tucson single family rents compare to the national average? And so unfortunately, there's no one single authoritative national tracking mechanism for this for the median going back to 2011. So we've kind of patched some different things together. So we pulled some data from a company called Rentometer. CoreLogic is another source. And so we're kind of trying to patch some stuff together here based on some different sources. But we're looking specifically at 3-bedroom median here in Tucson versus the national amount for that same 3-bedroom median price. So if we take a look at this in 2011, that $1,035, again, that 3-bedroom rate was at $1,050, and that was roughly on par with what the national average is. Now, if we fast forward that, we continue here in Tucson to go below the national average. And so as of, again, this year, May 2026, we're at $1,795 for being the median. The national median is $2,410, which puts us at 26% below the national average as far as the median goes, so quite a bit off. But let's take a look at some more things as it relates to the economy and the local employment market, and that'll help us understand a little bit better there too. So anyway, I'll come to that in a moment, but yeah, understand we are well below the national average. All right, the renters versus owner occupied, I think is kind of interesting. The renter occupied units, 108,311 is the estimate versus 112,458 owner occupied. So it's roughly a 50-50 here in Tucson of renters versus owner occupants as it relates to households. So I think that's an interesting stat. All right, so before we get on to the next section, don't forget to subscribe for more landlord tips like this, and feel free to contact us if you would like us to manage your Tucson rental house. All right, so let's continue on to the employment market and the employers here in Tucson to just kind of, again, give you a snapshot and put that previous information into perspective. So if we look at the median household income in 2024 now, so this is about a year and a half or 2 years old, the median household income in Tucson was $57,073. Now compare that versus the US median household, which is $78,538. So again, we're well below that national average, which would correlate then to us having a lower median rental rate as well. All right, so Tucson, if you do the math on that, is about 69% of the national average, or about $21,000 below, right? Here in Tucson, the median wage for all occupations was $46,450. Again, this is in 2024, and job growth is very, very flat. In 2025, Tucson added approximately 3,600 jobs. So if you do the math on that, that's about a 0.9% growth. So for all intents and purposes, basically flat. If we take a look at the population growth, that's also very flat. You know, that actually, it's projected to rise 0.7 to 0.8% annually based on a study by the Eller College of Management at the University of Arizona. So very flat there as well. So let's take a look at the employers, you know. So as it relates to employers in the private sector, healthcare and defense are definitely the backbone of the economy. You know, Raytheon is by far the biggest, Boeing, Banner Health, Tucson Medical Center. Those are really the backbones of the employers here in Tucson. And then we look at the government. So the government, the University of Arizona, huge impact here on our local economy. There are about 50,000 students, you know, and definitely those students generate demand for student rentals, particularly in central and midtown corridors near campus. And then the U of A employs over 14,000 people. And then the next big employer here is Davis-Monthan Air Force Base. So about 10,500 active duty personnel and civilian contractors who typically rotate through regularly, usually about every 2 to 3 years. And so that too creates demand for rentals. Other than that, those big employers, really Tucson is a services town. There's not a lot of big employers. It's just a lot of small business here in Tucson. So hopefully that gives you a better feel for the Tucson rental market and puts it in context with some of the local economic factors. And although the rents are below national averages, so are the local wages. So it's kind of a match in that regard. So don't forget to subscribe below, and I'll see you on the next video.